Thank you. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming out to the little Knowledge Nook session here where we get to talk a little bit about some of our products and helping our herds move forward. So we are going to kind of do a deep dive, or maybe kind of a superficial dive actually, into a research paper that was put out here by a group out of Iowa State. And so it's a nice big long paper, about 17 pages. If you really want to get in deep to it, you can go over to the booth. Diamond V is booth 3618. You can find it there, or as you have questions that get a little deeper, please come over and see us. We're going to go just a little bit about Diamond V through this process, so I want to start there. So Diamond V is a company that has been in Cedar Rapids, Iowa since 1943. Our manufacturing is all done there, sent worldwide for our products, but this gives us the consistency for our postbiotic technologies. We make it in one place so that it's the same inputs, it's the same process, it's the same inputs coming out, and we're going to dig into that a little bit more. But through this process, we are starting to branch out beyond just our postbiotics into some of our forage inoculants and also some mycotoxin mitigation products. So it's exciting times at Diamond V. So you saw in that title, postbiotics. Postbiotics is a little bit of a new word to a lot of people. Most people understand what a prebiotic or a probiotic is. So that prebiotic is going to be what we call kind of the fuel. The fuel that goes in and it feeds some sort of a bacteria or bug within that rumen in that digestive tract. Probiotics, those are going to be live organisms that go in. They may be able to adjust that microbiome if we can keep them to live and reproduce, but they have to be alive when they go through that process. So some people will call them the factories. And what we are as a postbiotic, we're produced through a very intimate process. We grow it under conditions that are controlled. We know that time, temperature, that pH, so that we can give you the exact answers. We're having those yeast cells, those Saccharomyces cerevisiae yeast, make a very specific product for us. And we have multiple products within our portfolio also, and so we can change that fermentation process to give you that exact answer through it. So we think of these fuels. They're there, they go in, kind of natural process. If you think silage, most of the people in this area right now are chopping their silage, or we're getting that pile to ferment. So you've got those nutrients that are there. We're either using the bugs that are there naturally, or we're adding them, and we're trying to get them to make the end products, those goods. If we specifically look at our Diamond V products, we have our yeast cell wall, so we have our moss, we have our beta-glucans, we have amino acids, we have polyphenols, we have antioxidants, but really the products that we are looking for is the metabolites that those yeast make for us, giving us those specific answers that we want to put into the system. So we talked a little bit about this, but because we make our products in one location for worldwide distribution, we're controlling those ingredients. We're using the same things day in and day out, so we know that those bugs can utilize them the way we need them to. We're doing this in a very highly controlled environment. We've got big fermentation vats that take us through this fermentation process, and then we utilize those to get those metabolites that we want. And so the Diamond V metabolites give us the answers that we want for our animals, be it the cattle that we're going to talk about today, or we even do other species through the process also. So this paper kind of came about as an opportunity for us to kind of look at, I shouldn't say us, for Iowa State to look at what there is for the Saccharomyces cerevisiae fermentation products data out there in the market. So they went to look at the research that's available, what's there, how it looks, and their challenge was really to understand how these products work. What's that mode of action that comes through this? So on the right-hand side over here, I am not a member of the International Scientific Association of Probiotics and Prebiotics, but I probably should be, because in 2021 they came out with a definition of actually what a postbiotic was, because this class of products was not a prebiotic, it was not a probiotic because it's not alive, so they needed this classification, so they created postbiotics. They gave us a definition, and part of that definition they said here's 5 ways that postbiotics can help affect the host in their health process. So modulation of the host metabolic responses, impacts on the host microbiota, effects on epithelial barrier integrity, immune modulation, and impacts on the nervous system. We're going to cover the first 4 towards the end of this. We don't have anything right now on the nervous system. We'll see if we find that or if another company does, but at this point, we're not there yet. So we're going to cover those first 4 mechanisms through the process. So as we look at SCPFs, FPs, their supplementation has been looked at many different ways. And so we're going to cover these 5, kind of broken some of this research down and lumped them into this way. Another way we could do it is looking at calves, dry cows, lactating groups. But I'm starting in this group so that we can break it down into somewhat of a process. So if you look at this bovine respiratory system, we have multiple papers that have come together to show that there are benefits of using SCFPs in our animals. The respiratory system is a lot of calf data. That's where most of our respiratory disease is. But you can see the different references there. We're going to dig into these a little bit. But again, on the shortened time that we have, I can't dig into them deeply. If we get to this digestive system, I think we have 7 different trials here looking at specific aspects of that digestive system. From weight gain and reducing diarrhea to, looking at some of our liver abscess rates and things like that in some of our beef cattle. So we've kind of got a broad spectrum of data to look at in that process. So we're going to dig into a few of these, but again, there's so much here. I just can't get to the details. This paper will do it, or else we can go on from there. Jumping into this digital dermatitis area. Pretty awesome. We've got 2 different papers that are published, or at least included in this one. We've got another paper that has been published since, showing us more information about how the Saccharomyces fermentation products work within this area. Mastitis. How many of you have dealt with mastitis on your dairies? Just 2 of you? Really? Come on. So mastitis is another huge area of opportunity for us in the dairy industry. It's probably one of our #1 leading causes of disease, one of our leading causes of culling in this process. And so this ability to go in and help these animals with the challenges that they face around mastitis. We're going to dig into that more, but just giving you this broad spectrum kind of starting point. And then we get into some of this production, heat stress, transportation, calving, this whole transition area. Again, I think we've got 7 or 8 different papers that we're listing here to look at how they go through this process. Heat stress, it's been a very hot summer. Is it supposed to be 83 degrees September 30th here in Madison? I don't think so. We're still dealing with heat stress in our dairy herds today. So, got a couple of papers we'll talk through there that really bring some value to us. We look at this transition process. The dry period is such a critical time for our cows. They've had a great lactation. Now we need to recuperate that. Dealing with the challenges, that stress level that they see, we know that affects how they milk next lactation. And so how can we help them move into that next lactation in a better stance? This is one of the graphs that comes out of the paper. You see lots of different categories across the top here of different areas that we've done the research. You've got kind of the outcomes through the middle, what we saw in those specific papers, but I really get down to the bottom. How does Saccharomyces cerevisiae fermentation products help? These 3 areas are the biggest areas that I think bring us the value. We reinstate homeostasis, so we get back to the normal process of the body. That's where we want animals to be. They go through this challenge, but we need to get back to that. Looking at a faster return to the production cycle. If we go through a challenge, do we produce as much milk? Do we grow as fast as we should have been in that challenge? Absolutely not. That immune system is activated. We're using the energy there that we can't send to productivity. And so by returning them to that productivity faster cycle, we're going to show you several papers through this process. And this reduced need for antibiotic treatment. This is very exciting from a veterinarian standpoint. Private practice for 19 years, and we're always looking for that next drug, that next antibiotic, how to move through that process. And now we're looking at ways that we can feed for health, feed to help these animals deal with these challenges that they are seeing. Just amazing what we're able to start looking at. Going to jump into a mastitis challenge. So again, these are products that are fed through their diet. and yet we're doing a mammary mastitis challenge. Seems like a long way to connect this, but we're going to get there. So in this trial, we fed animals, a control group and a treatment group, for 45 days. We then gave them a strep uterus challenge in the right rear quarter, and we're looking at milk production here. So you can see these cows are humming along very nicely on milk. Red line is our challenge. These cows saw the challenge. Their milk production dropped 35 pounds. Both groups, not one or the other, but both of them. But then you can see how the SCFP cows jumped back. They continued on their dry matter intake charts, and then they came back in this milk production. Our black line is when our antibiotics ran out, and so you can see then that these animals were able to produce about 200 pounds more milk as they went through that mastitis challenge. So that returned back to productivity. Pretty fascinating how we can do this, and we'll get into a little bit more details in this one. So we're looking at the cell count of these animals through this challenge. So again, our red line, that is our challenge time frame. We're taking somatic cell counts in those quarters, or in that quarter that we infected. You can see out here at about hour 13. No major change from either groups. They're both kind of running right along, but this is when that infection is actually really going to show up on that somatic cell. So these animals start to call in what they need to fight it. You can see that our SCFP animals didn't really jump in their cell count. Out here at 30 hours post-infection, they're 179,000 cell count. We wouldn't even call them infected. At 200,000 would be our typical infection number, right? So what happened there? What's the difference? These control animals, they're right here at hour 13, and then they end up at over 1 million cell count in that quarter. As we look back into that immune system, that's where that local immune system is kind of talking to the systemic. Locally, they're saying, do we have it? Can we control this infection? Can we get in and tackle it and move on? The SCFP animals were able to do that. They weren't requiring the systemic. The control animals, we can see through our testing that they required that systemic immune system to come in and fight, because they said, we will lose this battle if we don't get that help. So, amazing how this works. It's pretty cool to be able to look down deep into those tissues. We're going to get to that in a little bit, but we're laying this groundwork of what we've seen for results from SCFPs. Digital dermatitis. Has anybody dealt with digital dermatitis in their dairies? One again. Wow! You guys are some of the best dairies. Why are you here? So, digital dermatitis, this nasty disease that we're struggling to get a hold of on a lot of dairies. We're seeing it more and more in our feedlots, showing up in our feedlot pens, and we're getting killed on those average daily gains and days on feed, trying to get them through the process. So we have been able to look through some of our trials, and it started with this opportunity. We did a field trial out in the Pacific Northwest. After the whole trial was done, we looked back and we said, our digital dermatitis lesions dropped by 76%. Crazy number. So is that real? It asks us as a company to start digging deeper. How? Why? Is it real? So this is a trial that just was published here in the last year. We actually went in and gave a challenge model. So we brought in 120 calves. We did calves because of the amount of work that happens. These animals were handled daily. Their feet, they were put into a hoof chute. Their feet were raised up so that they could work on them. So if you tried to do this to an adult lactating cow, I don't think it'd be safe for the cow or for the people. So that's why we chose some smaller steers to do this process. But you can see in here, we did a surgical prep. We clipped these feet, got them all nice and clean. We actually glued on a silicone disc in this middle section. We put this disc on here so that we had an oxygen barrier. The bacteria that causes digital dermatitis will die when it's exposed to oxygen, so we need this barrier to protect it. The syringe you see there is actually an inoculum from 9 cows at the University of Wisconsin dairy. They went into that dairy, selected those 9 cows with lesions, surgically cut 11 lesions off those feet. Not just barely took it, they did a deep incision, got that whole lesion out. They took that, ground it up, made this solution, laid it on top of the skin but underneath the disc so that we had this oxygen barrier so that those bacteria could live. These feet had been soaked in water. They'd been wrapped in cotton, cellophane, put in a rubber boot for about a week prior to this application. So that skin was a little soft, but it gave us this ability to make a challenge model. And then you can see, to keep everything in place, we used some Gorilla Tape and taped them right back on there. These boots went back on, and then we allowed those animals to sit, that bacteria to work for a week, and then we started evaluating that process. So as we look at the results from that, we were measuring the M2 lesion. So 2 centimeters, or the size of a US quarter, red, nasty, painful lesion. That's what we were measuring from a challenge study. Awesome study. We got 100% of the animals to get the M1, the starting stage of digital dermatitis. But we were watching that progression. And so when we progressed from M1s to M2s, you can see here that our control animals, 22 of the 24, or 92%, they progressed from M1 onto the M2. Our SCFP animals, 15 of those 25 progressed. 10 of those we were able to halt the progression, stop that disease at that point. So we did not progress to that M2 lesion. So what that told us is a 1.53, the control animals are 1.53 times more likely to develop a digital dermatitis lesion. We didn't stop it completely, but boy did we help these animals deal with that challenge. And that's what's exciting through this process. I often look at our 95% confidence interval. What does that tell us? How confident are we that it's real? Here we're at a 1.09 to a 2.15. So I am 95% confidence this is real. That tells you guys there's real power behind this, and not just it worked one time through the process. That's part of what Diamond V has done also over our years. We've repeated information, trying to find out why. Not just it worked once, let's see how we can do it again. Can we make it better through that process? All right, getting to some lungs. I should have said one thing in here, I picked 3 bugs to trace because I'm a veterinarian and veterinarians are supposed to chase bugs. So I took the mastitis, I took the DD, and now we're on to the pneumonia, right? So BRSV, we ran a trial here. You can see those control pictures on the top. Quite a bit of red congested lung lesions compared to the treatment animals across the bottom. They're not completely clean, but a big difference in the gross morphology of those animals, those lung sets. As a veterinarian, I hated going to a farm that was dealing with calf pneumonia. The owner isn't happy, the calf personnel aren't happy, so that means nobody's happy. You get in there, everybody's upset. They want to try and fix it. Working with a product like this, we can go in and do it. So if you look on the left here, this is a clinical disease score. Very similar to like Sheila McGurk's calf scoring system, eyes, ears, nose, temperature. We did some listening to the lungs in that process. But you can see these treatment animals run right along the bottom without a lot of change over the 10 days. These control animals, you gave them the BRSV infection on day 0, a little bit of rise, but you start seeing that on day 3, 4, 5. They really start to show the disease side of it. And so as just a visual look, those animals looked pretty healthy from the treatment side. You see those lungs at the end of the 10 days. Ability for those animals to work through the process. We're going to dig a little deeper into why they work through it. But on the right here, we talk about shedding. So these were the nasal swabs. We're looking for the virus that's passed out. We're working on herds, right? So our control animals are across the top. You can see on day 3, 7, and 10, they are shedding more virus into that environment to contaminate it and get the next calf sick. From the SCFP side, we're able to shed less volume of that virus into the environment through this time frame. We've got other data that supports that, from salmonella shedding to some of these other things that we've looked at. So this repeated ability is pretty awesome in that aspect too. All right, so now I did kind of the fun stuff of what it is, where we're at, how the things are working. What are we seeing on the health side out there? Now we're going to dig into those 4 areas that the International Association described for us. they gave us 4 areas to kind of dig into of how postbiotics help our animals or our hosts that are used. You can look through there and give yourself some information. There's lots of information in this process, but we're going to just tackle each one a little bit individually, and then we'll talk about them all at the end. Uh-oh, I saw a picture. Sorry. Here you go. All right, so this metabolic response. We look at what some of these products can do. We're feeding animals, if it's dairy cows or if it's our calves along the process. Feed efficiency, growth, those kinds of things are very important to us. So getting the most out of the most expensive thing, our feed. So if we look at this, we can, our black line, so we're looking at NDF across the bottom. Some pretty low numbers, some pretty high numbers. These are actually forages from around the world to see how these 2 different products work in the process. And so you can see at each aspect, you've got a gray box, a red box, and a teal diamond, triangle, I guess. So each one of those, our control sample gave us less volatile fatty acids produced than our SCFP1 or our SCFP2s. And so if you summarize all of those, our SCFP1 product gave us a 7% increase in our volatile fatty acids, from very good forages to very poor forages. Big range across the world, just different samples that we had. Our SCFP2 product was able to return us a 17% increase in those volatile fatty acids. Getting more out of your feed. The forages that you want to feed, they're the cheapest thing for us to grow, to work with, getting more out of it. This was some data from 2018, so we've looked at redoing that. Repeated this in 2020, 2021 actually, sorry. Looking at different forages from 2020 and 2018. We repeated this with a different concept, but we looked at a gas production. And so we took these forages, compared them with corn silage, a BMR, a conventional corn silage, and then an alfalfa haylage, and added this SCFP product to them. And so you can see at each one of these time frames, at 6 hours, 12 hours, 30, 48, 120, and 250, each one of those, statistically, we got more digestibility of our NDF process. So again, getting more out of these with newer products. Trying to compare a little bit, everybody was on the BMR chase at that time. That whole process is changing moving forward too, but still that ability for you to have confidence that it's working with whatever product you're working. If it's across the pond for you guys, or if it's here in the United States, right? Looking at this host microbiota. On the left, we've got a calf that's getting its colostrum, first feeding a colostrum going in. What does that microbiota look like? Pretty naive, a little bit potentially as it came through the birth canal through this process, but we've got a very blank slate. We need to take that to these beautiful cows that you guys see out here at the show barns, in the arenas today. Very different microbiota in that rumen, right? I think it's, let's see, how many microbes are in that? It's 1 to the 15th zero, okay? If you look at 1 mil of liquid, it's 10 to 100 billion organisms can be in that. So these rumens are just packed full of organisms in that process. So we need to take that very blank slate to this ability to digest our forages. That's what we need to work through in this process. So we have a study that was done looking at this calf from 0 to 4 months of age. You've got your control animals here on the left, gives you kind of a basis of what's going. You don't have to look at all these bugs. Wait for the picture just 1 second. You're going to want the next click, okay? So I'm going to highlight a few, or actually Dr. McGill highlighted a few for me in this process. These are some organisms that we're looking at in this rumen, and what we're seeing on our SCFP animals, you see these animals or these organisms showing up in the 3-month testing. This is a fecal test, what's coming through these animals as we've been feeding treatment and controls. So you see these 7 organisms showing up at 3 months in the SCFP calves. They're not showing up until 4 months of age in the controls. So if we look at what's happening, this is the normal progression for the animals, this control. Their research group has done it with other animals, so they know what this is. And so we're able to take the SCFP products, put it into their diets, and we're able to progress their microbiota about a month ahead of schedule. And one of the biggest things that we saw here is we were producing a lot of butyrate. So butyrate is huge in our growth of our digestive tracts. Gets our villi to get their numbers up, to get our villi-crypt ratios increased, so we get more absorptive capacity within that rumen, within that small intestine. And so through this, we can see that we're working towards that. We're giving them the microbiota of a month-older calf. Taking this calf that we need to go from a milk baby or a monogastric to that ruminant. Now, I hope we have the next stages where we're looking at 4 up. We've got a lot of adult data that we'll get to, well, we actually won't because it was published after this, but there's fun things happening on this microbiome. All those organisms, how they interact, what we feed them, what happens over the dry periods, right? You go from one feed to the next, that microbiota changes. And as we look at these products going in, you're giving them that answer to help those bugs that are there get more out of it. We look at this epithelial barrier integrity. Your skin is a barrier. Your lungs have an epithelium. Your digestive tract, and our calves and our cows, their digestive tracts, their reproductive tracts, their mammary glands, all have an epithelial layer. So what we're trying to understand is how we can help that barrier. So in this trial, you've got your control animals here, and you've got your treatment animals here, and then they're given hydrogen peroxide. Very simplified description of this, but that's what happens. We put some hydrogen peroxide in there to break down these barriers. So those tight junctions that happen. You can see in our control animals, we start to lose the definition of our cells. This process through here. Then in your treatment animals, you can still very clearly see your cellular junctions. Those tight junctions that are showing up to protect. And as we think about this, our digestive tract needs to be a little bit open so that we can absorb our nutrients. But as we open it up and allow pathogens to go through, that's when your calf or your cow's immune system needs to kick in and really fight. So we don't want it to break down that much. We need to find it just right. But you think of your mammary gland or your respiratory lung, your lungs. Those are other areas that we need to protect. And so we can show with this data, or we've got some subacute ruminal acidosis data, showing that we're able to hold those tight junctions better than the control animals. So that this SCFP product helps mitigate those challenges of barrier breakdowns. Gives us a stronger integrity to keep that out of the body so the animal doesn't have to deal with it. How do we affect this immune system? We're going to specifically look at mastitis for a minute. Told you about that trial. I showed you some milk production. I showed you some somatic cell data. Helping us understand how these products work, we're going into the cellular level. Pretty hard to talk about that as I'm feeding it to a cow, and now I'm talking about the cellular level of the mammary gland, right? We're working all the way down there, and sometimes it's through chemicals. Those things like butyrate is a great messenger. It gives us information around our epithelial also. And so in this trial, we were able to take liver and mammary gland biopsies during this infection, and we could see that 150 different gene expressions changed between the SCFP and that control group. Huge change in that. Now, 102 of them are upregulated, 102, those numbers don't add up. I did a little error on that one. So 48 downregulated. So we're doing different things in different areas. That's the hardest thing for us to explain to you. We're not doing the same thing everywhere. We really worked on this inflammation piece. We know that we're able to help deal with that inflammation that's going on to reduce it in that mammary gland, and that's really what mastitis is. It's that inflammation of the mammary gland that we're dealing with. So we help there. We help on oxidative stress. Those free radicals that are out there, we have antioxidant properties to be able to bind them up so they're doing less damage through this process. Gets kind of deep, but it's what it is. We see some of those same similar responses as we did in the mastitis with our BRSV. We looked at the resting lung before we infected them with BRSV. We had increased phagocytosis. We had cells that are primed and ready to fight that infection. We showed decrease in the pro-inflammatory cytokines. So we're reducing that inflammation process there, helping them be ready if something comes. We're not activating that immune system, but we're setting it up. We're getting it ready. Then actually, as we gave them the BRSV, we can follow through and we can see that we decreased IL-17, cytokine that recruits neutrophils into the lungs. We're able to show this reduction in neutrophil recruitment. Again, this viral shedding, viral load, and through that process, we showed less clinical disease, helping them deal with their challenges through the day. Is every day challenging for them? I believe so. We dug into this lung more. In this trial, we actually added Pasteurella multacida to the BRSV to get a little bit more of an intense challenge. But again, we did these gene expressions or biopsies of the tissues. We can compare these two, and you can see in cluster 1, there's a big difference in what you're seeing through there, right? You don't have to understand it. We get to tell you what it is. But it's actually showing us that the Saccharomyces cerevisiae fermentation products are actually increasing lung healing. So they've dealt with the infection, and they're returning that lung back to normal. They're resolving the inflammation that's going on. This cluster 2, again, you can see differences in what they're highlighting. Decreased inflammation. If we look inside the lungs, inflammation is very bad. It's what gives us the most damage when that infection comes in. So we want to decrease it, but yet we need to be able to attack the virus or the bacteria and clear it. And that's through the process. Cluster 3, you see this decreased inflammation again and less chemotaxis, so less things moving into that lung. It's pretty interesting. Where we really get challenged is if we looked at prior to the infection and after the infection, we're doing two different things. Prior to that infection, we actually increased a little bit of that inflammation, right? And then the disease comes and we decrease it as they fight. So it's not just a whole, we do always increase or decrease. You have to look at the details of the specific areas. And that's what gets so hard about this process for us. It's not a simple answer on one hand. On the other hand, it helps them deal with challenges. It's about as simple as I can get. Heat stress. How many of you have a heating blanket on your bed? These poor cows, there you go. These poor cows got a heating blanket so that we could induce heat stress. Little electric blanket, you put it on their back, you turn it on, you look at their body temperature. Are they stressed or not? Gives you that ability. Pretty fun research. So we did this for a week. We're able to look at what happens. The SCFP animals had a lower cortisol. They had a matched cortisol at the beginning of the trial. You turned on heat blankets, and those control animals jumped in their cortisol levels. Cortisol is a stress hormone. It's that ability to look and help these animals with the stress. We looked at somatic cell, paired on the way in. The control animals jumped in somatic cell. The SCFP animals actually decreased slightly in that challenge. We looked at our inflammation markers. We're able to maintain some of those, but help them deal with this inflammation as needed. So heat stress is real. It's been happening. We're excited about this. Another trial was done for us in Mexico with about 968 animals in the two different groups. We're able to show increased milk in our multitiparous cows, decreased feed intake in all of them, and all of them gained weight. So you gained feed efficiency in the stress of heat stress, and they still gained weight. So if you looked at first lactation, they didn't give us much milk, but they put it on their back like they're supposed to for us. So these abilities to deal with the stresses that are out there. I broke that down into 4 different areas. The paper broke this down into 4 different areas, right? I don't think they're 4 areas. I think they're one area very much intertwined. And I think this microbiome is the connective piece. It's the piece that gives us all these opportunities as we look at these products. getting into that rumen, getting into that digestive tract, and bringing us health and value through the process. That's what we're trying to do, and that's what this SCFP product is bringing to you as producers out there. I want to thank you for your time. Any questions? And wait, there's a microphone running around if you have the questions. If you scan this, it gets my details right in for you. If you want to contact me later on, cell phone, email, any of those things, gives you that ability. And again, our booth is 3618. Come on over. We've got all kinds of information to share with you. Kind of ran through it. It's big paper. Lots of things there, but it's very exciting for us.
Was the NDF digestibility data off of in vitro or in vivo?
In vitro, yep.
Thank you.
With your data as far as your reduced humoral response and things like that, did they also pair that with any flow cytometry to see if you're actually just reducing the amount of immune cells, or are you actually reducing their response? Or like their cytokine production or antibody production?
So the different papers would show you different things, but we have different levels of cytokines that are produced, control versus treatments, and then we would have some flow cytometry to give us levels that are in the different tissues, right? Because you really want to know what's getting into the tissue to fight that infection.
Right. Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions? You're letting me off easy here. This is great. I must have done a really good job. Oh, one more.
I'm curious about the, could you say more about the mechanism of how it's improving gut health and immune health? Like, is it metabolites that are produced by the yeast, or polysaccharides, or what do you think is going on, like, at a chemical level?
So how the mode of action is really working. I think it's going to be both of those things. Our metabolites are going to be what we really hang our hat on, that we are growing these yeast or stressing them to get the right metabolites, and that's why we can change that to get different products depending on what we're going after. But we know that the moss, the beta-glucans, they bring us value. Our antioxidants and polyphenols that are in there are bringing us values, but you have to go to the specific area of focus to know exactly what's happening. So it's not, I don't think I can stand here and tell you this is what it does everywhere, because we see similarities between the mammary gland and the lungs and even the foot. If we look at epithelial barriers, right? The foot, you need to keep that epithelial layer of the skin intact so that those bacteria don't drive through. And so we have those things, but it's not just one thing. It's this addition of the metabolites in different areas. So I don't think it's just one. I think it's many of those things going together. But you can see that through the different research. It's hard to explain it, I know that, but come on over to the booth, we'll do a deep dive.
Thanks.
Excellent. I'm off the hook. Thank you very much again.